My name is Sarah Conley. I'm the Conservation Coordinator for the International Elephant Foundation. You guys all met Julie via email, and when she greeted you, we also have Deborah Olson, who's our Executive Director. She's the one out in space here. And we are here today for our very first ever Conservation Roundtable featuring Mike Keigwin, who is the founding trustee of the Uganda Conservation Foundation, and he first started working in Uganda in 1997. He has a very distinguished career, leading to, in 2016, Mike was awarded an MBE, or Member of the Most Excellent Order for the British Empire, for his conservation work. So he's a heavy hitter when it comes to conservation. IEF has supported his organization for over 10 years, working together to support the construction of over 12 ranger stations, both land and marine, provide support for Murchison Falls and Queen Elizabeth National Parks, and a variety of other things. Mike's going to talk all about the challenges that they face, the different approaches that we have, and more. So I will turn it over to Mike. He's coming direct from Uganda, from the Joint Operations Command Center, so sometimes the internet might be a little spotty, so he may turn off his video at some points just so we can hear him better. Take it away, Mike.
Hi everyone, and welcome from Murchison Falls National Park. Should you not hear me, just put your hands up so I get an idea, and I know that my internet's gone a bit rubbish. I'm afraid it is wobbling a little bit. Also, if you're bored of what I'm talking about, just turn off or turn me off or wave or, do a bit of that. So yeah, it's a real delight to be chatting to you all from across America to middle of Uganda. I really hope you and families are all okay and have been okay. We've, in the last 2 days, come out of a pretty heavy lockdown with COVID. It's been pretty miserable over here, and without a health care system, and pretty much less than 1% of people vaccinated, it's a pretty unhappy scenario here. And maybe just to cover that, the Ugandan Wildlife Authority is the government organ who manages the 10 national parks and 27 wildlife reserves, and wildlife outside of protected areas as well. They are 95% dependent upon tourism. And one of the greatest impacts of COVID has been, of course, the complete collapse of travel and tourism, which undermined the ability of the Ugandan Wildlife Authority to be able to feed their rangers, fuel their cars, put tires on the very basics that you would imagine any operation would require. Are you all hearing me so far? I'm always a bit nervous that I'm talking when everything's frozen.
It's a little bit in and out. But...
I'll take the video off. Let us see if without video it works a little better. Okay, so yes, the 95% of the tourism revenues that are required for the Ugandan Wildlife Authority to keep going have basically gone. And over the last 18 months, the poor Ugandan Wildlife Authority is expected to do everything that it's been doing in patrols, problem animal control, tourism, everything it could possibly do without any revenue. And we're now getting to that critical point of how on earth do we keep going from here? That said, the park I'm in now, Murchison Falls, has about 250 rangers. They're active, they're busy, they're removing snares, they're protecting wildlife, they're responding to wildlife caught up in traps. They're responding to the communities that are suffering from elephants in crops and lions maybe marauding around their cattle every day. So there's no lack of effort going on. And thanks to the likes of IEF, we've been able to make sure that the morale and training and capacity of the park is pretty good. A long way to go. I'm in Murchison right now to basically start to finish off the power going into the radio towers that will mean for the very first time we'll be able to communicate across 85% of the park. Now that might sound kind of crazy. You might assume that we have phones everywhere and we have connections everywhere, but we simply don't. For 50, 60 years, this park has had almost no communications. And you can imagine as a ranger, if you're hurt, you need support for any particular type of operation, how on earth do they communicate that that's happening or that they can get that support? And the simple fact is that they can't until, you know, the likes of the International Elephant Foundation and other partners have really stepped in. We've struggled. So we're putting in power now and into all of those towers. Then we put in the radio system, and all of a sudden, our 40 ranger posts distributed into the middle of nowhere in this park and outside of the park can communicate. We can make sure they're all okay. If someone's sick, we can respond. If there's a problem, we can respond. We're always able to be there. And it's the frontline people that are the most important. They're the girls and the boys who are patrolling every single day, making sure their areas are safe for the wildlife. And of course, the tourists, if they're in those areas, are also safe. And if the community conservation rangers are able to communicate, should they have elephants or lions or other animals in and around people's crops or threatening lives, they are also able to respond. So right now, it's all about communications. But over the last 10 years, the International Elephant Foundation has been supporting us, making sure we put ranger posts in the right places. What we're really talking about there is, again, the welfare of the rangers and making sure that we can protect every day of the month, every day of the year, critical habitats where wildlife populations should be strong. And we're patrolling every day there. Previously, if you go back 20 years ago, even when I used to come in here patrolling, we used to walk 40, 50 kilometers to get to the area that we are patrolling. We would start the patrol. Whatever happened in that patrol, we would then have to walk 40, 50 kilometers back. Now that's been going on even in some ranger areas now. So imagine if you're injured and you still have to walk 40, 50 kilometers back and you've got no communication. Or if you're carrying traps, or if you're escorting arrested poachers. Quite an ordeal to walk 40, 50 kilometers after you've already done it once and you've done your patrol. This is not exactly a walk in, it is a walk in the park, but it's not a manicured park with a nice walkway and a Starbucks halfway down. There are no tracks in most of these areas. There is no refreshment. You're drinking water from lakes and rivers. You're eating very, very basic food. So times are changing, and over the last 10 years, we've, with the International Elephant Foundation, managed to put in about 10 to 12 ranger posts across Murchison, and that has triggered a quite incredible recovery in wildlife. Yes, we've managed to stop animals being killed by poachers to a large degree, not all of them. We're always going to lose some animals, never going to stop it all. But the Uganda cob, which is an antelope, has gone from about 60,000 Uganda cobs to 150,000. The rare Rothschild's giraffe has gone from 400 to 2,000. And they're just two animals, sort of, to put this into perspective, 75%, 80% of the Rothschild's giraffes in the wild are in this park, and we'd crashed to 400 left. So getting them back up to 2,000, and we're 80% of the population, is one heck of a conservation success. So having the rangers in the right places, in a dry ranger post where they're secure, where they can hang their clothes, they can get clean water, they can charge their phones, they can call their wives and children if they need to. Respecting the ranger on the front line has been very, very important. And the results has been high morale, effort, energy, resilience during a time of COVID where I've just had a big conversation with rangers in the operations room. Last month, they didn't have food. And you know what? They complained about it, but they kept patrolling. Now we've come back in as of yesterday. We arrived last night and we've delivered another $3,000 worth of very basic foods. It's not exactly your McDonald's or five-star restaurant food. It is very much a very bog standard rice, or something we call posho. It's maize flour that's usually a porridge, but you put more flour in, it becomes solid. And then you add boiled beans. That is it. That is what we can afford. But the guys and girls continue, and they're not stopping. So we're doing our best. We also have, thanks to the IEF team, been supporting other activities, including aerial surveys. So we've been flying. We did it in 2019 and 18 in Queen Elizabeth National Park and in Murchison. And that was really to understand exactly what animals we had where. Were we directing our resources to the right places? And it really helped us to understand, are there places in this park that we're not actually concentrating on enough? If we're going to trigger, catalyze a greater recovery in an area, were we considering everything? And the aerial surveys highlighted lots of opportunities for us, some of our own failures, which we've corrected. And of course, poachers change their strategies, so failures are always going to be there. But we quickly were able to adapt and move on. We've also been able to put in a veterinary response unit. That response unit is every single day removing snares from elephants and giraffes and lions. And right now, the Ugandan Wildlife Authority barely has the veterinary drugs to do the very basics. So as you probably might have heard when Debbie was talking at the beginning, there is something called the Wildlife Ranger Challenge, which we're doing, as are many, many parks across Africa. It's run through another partner of ours called Trust, and that is focused on the operational funding towards the basics, such as veterinary drugs, fuel and food, which also IEF do as well. And it's a bit of a grueling 21 kilometer run through the park with 22 kilograms on our backs, and teams of 4 from rangers across Africa do it. And it's a bit of fun, a bit of competition between the different parks. I think there's about 200 parks doing it this year. And Murchison is one of those parks, so is Queen Elizabeth, so is Cadepo, all parks that the IEF have been supporting so avidly, and has also been, making sure the rangers are equipped, clothed, and have food rations and, training. So we actually have the British military and the US military training our rangers as well. Again, something that's been run through our organization. So there's an awful lot that goes on in the park. It's very difficult to sum it up. The challenges that happen are ridiculous. COVID was one, the general election was another. The flooding of the River Nile happened last year. It's still 3 meters above record levels. And then, of course, we had another little delight of locusts dropping in. But when the communities are unable to farm, what do? When the communities are unable to get employment because of the park, because of tourism, what do? When their land is flooded, and when they're unable to go to market because of a lockdown, to trade tomatoes for onions, to be able to put a plate of food in front of their kids, what do? Well, of course, they look for what might be free. It's the only thing left to them, and that's potentially laying snares and poaching. So the community program, again, which IEF's been involved with, identifying youth within families in the villages, getting them through vocational college training, getting them employed, sometimes it starts with an apprenticeship, is absolutely critical. And that family then has some cash, some small amounts, but to them it's everything. It means they can feed their kids, they can feed their grandparents, they can put a dry roof over their shamba, so to speak, their little house. if someone has malaria, they can get some drugs to solve it. And don't think that COVID is the only problem here. Actually, malaria is far bigger and continues to be an enormous problem. So yes, every area you can possibly think of, we have to consider, sometimes get involved with, sometimes in the short term, sometimes building infrastructure. And sometimes what we do is the really boring stuff, but it has to be done. There are also the times when it's incredible, and there are many of those times. And working with the rangers is always incredible. Sitting around a campfire, listening to their stories is a privilege. Driving through the park when everyone else is locked down is a privilege. So you won't hear me complaining about it. We've been extremely lucky, but I cannot overemphasize the strain that parks across Africa are going through. Not just the rangers, the communities that rely on the parks, tourism, as well as all the other revenue that can be generated and the economic development that happens because of protected areas. And of course, there are those who are working around non-protected areas on private land. There will be all sorts of questions from you, but I've tried to give you an overview. My background is somewhat bizarre, as Debbie knows, coming from being a professional rugby player and Royal Marine to spending 10 years in Virunga National Park, Queen Elizabeth National Park, then going back to the UK, being a Deloitte corporate strategist, finishing with the London Olympics on the Olympic Committee, coming back in 2012, and then helping recover Murchison Falls, and I'm also now helping to recover Queen Elizabeth's in Kadepo. It isn't a career path I would advise on anyone. There isn't a path. It's just bumbling along, finding your way and doing what you can. It's extraordinary. It's a hell of an experience. And so I think it was Elizabeth who's just joined the conservation world. I can't really give you an objective to go for. It's an interesting one. But just follow your heart and go for it. It's my best advice. So I'm going to open up the floor to any questions, and I will do my jolly best to answer them as best I can.
Thank you, Mike. That's great. Everyone feel free to unmute yourself and ask whatever questions you have. I think there's a small enough group to where we don't really have to worry too much.
This is Sylvia. How many parks is the IEF doing work in right now?
I think that's really for Debbie and Sarah to answer.
I think you're on mute, Debbie.
Oh, yes. If we're talking about Uganda, we have supported Queen Elizabeth and Murchison. And then we also have another project in Kabale. And then we just submitted a grant proposal to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service with Mike to develop a transboundary transboundary project along Uganda and Kenya using the conservancy approach. It's an exciting project. It's going to be somewhat expensive, but it's so exciting to think that we could protect such a large area and protect an area for elephants to go from Kenya to Uganda and into the southern areas of Kenya, and essentially become one big population because the space is there for elephants to move back and forth and exchange genetics, something that's not currently happening or possible because of human development and other problems. So as far as other parks in our whole palette of projects, I don't know how many. We're in Nepal and India and Sumatra, Zambia. So I don't know. We could.
Yeah, it's quite wide. It's quite widespread. Yes.
Exactly.
Mhm.
For
I like the transboundary project that you were just talking about. That those kinds of projects are always intriguing to me.
well, absolutely, because wildlife does not know
That's
national
right.
borders.
That's
So
and they don't care about all that.
right. To try to give a bigger overview, for 2021, IEF has 22 projects in 13 countries.
Oh my.
But that some of those span multiple national parks. So I don't know the specific number of national parks to give you. But yes, the transboundary project that we're hoping to get off the ground for Uganda and Kenya is very exciting. Debbie mentioned that it's based on the conservancy model. Debbie or Mike, do you want to explain the conservancy model for anyone that may not be familiar?
Yeah, I mean, imagine on private land. Why would you accept wildlife on your private land if you're losing crops or you're losing livestock? Your choice is about making sure that you can feed your family just as you're doing at home. And it's an economic choice to many, to most. And what a conservancy basically does, as another organization who's partnered in this project has pioneered, their guys called the Northern Rangeland Trust, is to say, right, well, actually, why are we trying to take control of somebody else's land and tell them what to do on their land? This is their land. It's always been their land. So why don't we empower them? Why don't we give them the rights and together with other people's land, group them together to enable them to generate value from that land to benefit, we hope, better from wildlife than it would be in any other opportunity such as agriculture. So what the Northern Rangeland Trust has done is to empower the cultural leaders and the landowners, which is all cultural, and to make sure that with investment and support, people invest in lodges and alternative incomes, which could be anything to do with carbon, could be forestry, could be anything that is supportive to the landscape and the soil types and whatever's necessary in that area, or could be possible in that area, and make it a viable proposition for the future. And where expertise is needed to be brought in, which largely in these areas comes down to the communities and people wanting people to have safety and security, not fighting and war and cattle raids and intertribal fighting. And as soon as you get the elders succeeding in getting peace, suddenly investment comes in and the communities themselves manage everything themselves. It's not a government doing it for them. It's not an NGO dipping in and out and leaving them in trouble. It is them running their society on their land for their benefit. And the role of, in this case, Northern Rangeland Trust or us and Debbie is to make sure that we can find opportunities and get them stimulated to be successful. And the role of something like the Northern Rangeland Trust, which is now 39 conservancies across central and northern Kenya, has become pivotal and is entirely run by the elders. It's not run by as an NGO from someone foreign. It is run by the conservancies who themselves are run by their own elected cultural leaders. It's got nothing to do with an NGO or someone external. And it's so well run that lots of people get involved and it grows and grows. And the idea here is growing what they've already got into further west into Kenya, across the transboundary, across the border into Uganda. And for the very first time ever, expanding their expertise and knowledge and skills to help us learn and do it properly. Because the opportunity, as Debbie says, is magnificent. The lions, cheetah, wild dog, elephants, the herbivores, you name it. I mean, and not least of all, the very people that live there and have always lived there.
So essentially, the communities, the conservancies agree to protect the animals, and in doing so, they benefit. And I'm not just talking about through tourism, but I'm talking about, as Mike was saying, alternate livelihoods, where in Northern Rangelands Trust, the women have a pretty booming jewelry operation where they create cultural jewelry and sell it internationally. There's a lot of these other programs that benefit the community, and in benefiting the community, it's protecting the wildlife. Another thing that Northern Rangelands Trust does is they have a grazing committee where they rotate their fields or rotate the areas so they don't overgraze any one area, so there's enough food for the wildlife as well as the cattle. And then the cattle, our role, or the NGO's role, is to find places to market those cattle, to make sure that the cattle get to market and there is a good price given and it goes back into the community. So it's a wonderful program. It's really what needs to be done throughout Africa and probably Asia too, allowing the people to control their lands and protect their natural resources, which includes the animals.
Exactly. And the more control and integrated into their own decision-making process the community is, the more conservation buy-in we will get, because people need to have stake in the game. So if they have that sort of that integration, if they are treated as stakeholders who are making their own decisions, as opposed to the kind of classic, almost Western colonialist idea of coming in and saying, you guys do this, you're going to get a much more sustainable, long-term, positive outcome. So that we are very excited about this potential to bring the Conservancy model into Kadepo and Uganda. All right, any more questions for Mike?
I have a question. I don't know that it's just for Mike. It might just be for everyone here. So as I mentioned, I work at a PR firm, and I couldn't help but notice you guys don't have a social media presence. And then I'm aware of other organizations that do and have, you know, really engaged audiences about like the work that they do. And I think that what Michael has like talked about, I found to be so fascinating and also deeply concerning. And it's made me want to find ways to be more helpful. And I'm sure that that could be a common response from a lot of folks if they were to know. So do we have anything in the works? Do we have maybe channels I just maybe don't know about? Is there a social media presence that I just haven't found? Because I remember looking a few months ago and then I don't think I found anything, and then I just forgot about it.
Absolutely. Well, we have a fairly active Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram account, all three. And we do have a YouTube channel that we post videos to, but they also get cross-posted to Facebook. On Twitter and Instagram, it's @ElephantsIEF. And then on Facebook, it's the International Elephant Foundation.
Okay.
But there are links on our website and also usually at the tail end of our e-newsletter. But yes, we do all of our social media organically, so we don't quite have the presence that sort of the big guys do that pay for PR firms and things like that. So any tips, pointers, assistance, we are not above taking advice from people who know better than us.
Absolutely. So look out for an email from me soon.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it. That's great.
Just to add in, the conservation sector's largely run by people with enormous passion. And it starts off with small groups. And whereas you might call in industry or the private sector just a supply chain, it becomes more of a support chain. And you're getting my Deloitte strategy sort of head working on this now. Nobody in this sector has what they need. They don't have the resources, they don't have the skills, they don't have the time. We are propelled from one crisis to the next, but it is absolutely true that we are not active enough as small organizations or medium organizations. But there are the monster conservation organizations who will spend 60% of their revenue on marketing and fundraising. And they don't necessarily have a great reputation now, and they've been found out. And in the business world, we call it a theory of resource partitioning, where a consolidated market ends up in niches, and those niches are usually run by passionate people who grow them quite successfully. And that is very much true in this sector as well. You can probably see it best recently in the gin sector, where there are probably 3 or 4 brands, and now there are thousands. What you've got in conservation is now a large number of small niche organizations that have targeted particular passions that they have. And they might be IEF, it could be PAMS, it could be UCF, it could be Save the Elephants, it could be Africa Parks. They take many different shapes and models, but they will always struggle to have the financial backing, because who is going to finance this sort of thing? We do it when we can, how we can. And just as Sarah said, the likes of you putting your hand up and saying, I can help. I can give a few hours a day or week or whatever, or get your company to take on a role to try and, you know, make a bit of a sensation here or there. It would really help. It really would. From the guys on the front line, this is why I said it's a support chain. Often people regard, you know, IEF as a grant-giving organ. But if the guys on the ground, like myself, don't help IEF, then they're unable to go to market and say, actually, look, this is what's going on in the front line. And they need information from us. So when do we find time to get that information? They need content from us. Right. When do we have the money or the resources or the skills to do that? I'm not a photographer. I don't have a film crew. I'm often doing things far too reckless for my own safety, let alone for others. So it becomes a really big challenge to make sure that every end of this support chain has what it needs to be successful. I think what it boils down to is we're all doing our best, but the more that are involved, the more that are aligned in the support chain, the better we'll all be.
I have some experience putting videos together of sort of processes and maybe even people. Like I'm fascinated by just who these rangers are. And I think that human interest element alone would be like wonderful for people to also see these other people who are deeply proud of their country and their land and the animals and the ecosystems that live there and are working to protect it and have to wait to get rice and beans for days at times. I think that is incredibly powerful and shows an organic commitment that sometimes on the West we don't see. We just see a lot of Western organizations and multilateral organizations going in, but to see that groundswell of support and protection from people who live there, and of course they're passionate about it. I think that is amazing content that I would see. So just to throw this out there, this is just an idea, I'm just like brainstorming, is if there is someone there, if one of the rangers there has an interest in maybe being eyes and ears, like I'm happy to see what I can do and maybe pay for like a device, you know, get a phone over there, and then we can just figure out what kind of content or what kind of images or what kind of videos maybe that person could take and then just send them to me. And I'll email you guys about it and talk much more thoroughly and see what is even okay. If none of this is okay, then please just let me know. But anything that we can do, I think would be great, because I'm proud to be part of this and I talk about the work that we do. And I think there's a lot of great stories here and we should tell them.
I think that's very, very generous of you. Maybe what I'd also suggest is that there's a lot of business to business which we are missing. The travel industry, the various industries that are involved in interests in Africa and Asia, with, you know, the scope of some of the countries that David's already mentioned. We're almost silent on things like clever campaigns on GoFundMe. as an example, to understand how to pitch it, who to pitch it to, how to make it successful. You're an industry professional working within society. I look through here, I'm sure that the likes of Elizabeth and Sylvia would also be able to, guide or be interested. But if we were to say or Debbie were to say, there's an incredible project in Indonesia or wherever it is, can we help promote this issue that we've got right now, a campaign around something? It would be fantastic. I think everybody would be, thrilled to see, just sending some range of bits and bobs. I know where you're coming from, but it would disappear very quickly as well. We've got to learn how to reach these societies and businesses, communicate to them, and actually they get trust in brand, so we can grow it and develop a different line of revenue, because it's exhausting for the IEF team going through the same efforts that they valiantly put in. But if we can reach into new networks that can be sustained with a brand that's understood and recognized and respected, then we would really help them a lot.
Hi, Michael. This is Bruce Schulte.
Go ahead.
It's me. How are you, Squire? Have you got something jumping behind you? Have you got Debbie in space and you've got a killer whale behind you?
Yeah, that was from a research trip to Africa a week ago. So doing some whale stuff as well as elephants. I had a question for you. So you brought up on the bigger scale this idea of all different types of agencies and NGOs and things like that are involved in these issues. This is right now I'm working with a group associated with IUCN about this. IEF, we've talked about doing some type of workshops, for instance, on HECC. One of the things that I deal with globally with conservation is the fact that we're all going after the same set of donors typically, and we're competing with each other over the same problems, trying to say that, our group does it better than the group down the road. And even on a small scale, I just put in a U.S. Fish and Wildlife proposal for Kenya, and here you guys are putting one in for Uganda and Kenya. So even we're not even talking to each other. And that just hurts everybody in the end, because the money only goes so far and there's only so much of it unless we can broaden the number of people who are giving and involved, and not just giving financially, but giving as Sana, is that how you say your name? Sana? Okay. The way she's just offered, which happens to us all the time through our Earthwatch project and everything else. Anybody that gets involved in us wants to give in some way or another: time, energy, expertise, money. What's been your experience over there in talking with the players, the NGOs, the governments, and all that kind of stuff, and trying to get them on the same page so we're not duplicating effort, and so we have a broader message, and you don't have to have each small group trying to send out their webpage and all that kind of stuff? Have you had any success that way? Do you have a larger consortium in Uganda that's working well together? Can you speak to that?
There's a poison chalice to speak about. Conservation politics. I've never seen a sector so disorganized and vile to each other. And it's not one that I particularly like sometimes, but it is one I work in. I understand where it comes from, and Bruce is entirely right. A lot of it is competitiveness for grants. Some of it is competitiveness in the academia world, and it isn't healthy. The Uganda Conservation Foundation was set up to be an umbrella organization. I'm very much not an academic. I am not interested in publishing. I have not seen a lot of value from the publishing academia world in Uganda, and I'm not terribly pleasant about it at times because it's lied about. But there are people who are doing great jobs and are being honest about it, and are putting huge effort with massive results as well. So there's a number of linkages that are broken down, have broken down rather, and some of them include, how do we enable, and you said it yourself, Bruce, how do we get people to be part of the front line, to be part of conservation? Giving them the opportunity. Far too often it's become an exclusive club where the opportunity has not been allowed. And that to me is where the likes of Earthwatch and co have succeeded, and their business model is great. It allows people to get to the front line and contribute in some manner. And as long as the objectivity of the project is good, happy days, it works. But we all must make sure that all projects are linked to what is actually needed. The communications that are going on in zoos as an education forum are linked to what is needed on the ground. We've also got to make sure that the barriers between some entities within the conservation sector, like zoos, in situ to ex situ animals, are broken down. People respect each other, people are polite to each other. There's a code of conduct, if you like. What we're trying to do is to do just that, and it is not easy. So within Queen Elizabeth, within Murchison Falls and Kadepo, we're really putting in the management structures that everything is being done through the Ugandan Wildlife Authority. It is imperative that they are seen and are the people on the ground that are managing the parks and all of the conservation and development world going on in those parks. They are mandated to do that by their governments. So it is our job to make sure they are successful in that job. And we stand alone in that. We're the only organization actually taking that approach. My approach is one day we won't be here. They will be. So will the communities. The only primary stakeholders that exist are the communities and the Ugandan Wildlife Authority, the government organ. Other than when it comes down to conservancies, then it's just the communities within the legal frameworks of the country. So all of us have got to engage and support and train and make sure that the government agency, in this case the Ugandan Wildlife Authority, is better able to cope with everything that they face in the parks. And it is our objective to make sure that we're obsolete eventually. If they don't need us, that's brilliant. Let's go to another place where there's a challenge and sort those problems out, but not just perpetuate a lifestyle, which often happens in a park. You get people there forever just doing pretty much non-value add work, but enjoying a lifestyle, which is not what it's about. So I quite agree with you, Bruce. It's a very difficult, thorny question. We have a relationship with the Ugandan Wildlife Authority where we are essentially the same. We're just them, utterly trusted. Right now, with the country and African protected areas largely without any operational funds, and we're not alone in this, we are the only organization who are filling that gap. And I'm horrified to say that. There are organizations out there with huge amounts of money who are not helping. They have not said, can we pay for your fuel for the year? Or can we pay for some rangers in the parks? And I sit with the executive director of the Ugandan Wildlife Authority. I sit with the finance director. I know their position. And I've said to them, you have to say to a park like Kibale, there are so many partners there. Tell them what your costs are. Ask them to contribute. In Burundi and Magahinga, for instance, the gorilla parks, the most massively funded parks in Africa, the Ugandan Wildlife Authority could easily take them off their books and say, for a year, we're covered by these wonderful organizations. And wouldn't that be great? Because then they could concentrate on the places that don't have so much support and the networks to support them. If we all could work together, and I'm 100% behind what you're saying, Bruce, the Ugandan Wildlife Authority would be in a seismically different environment. And the step changes they would need to make to be more successful would be possible. And they would have been making those already. But trying to move some of these organizations to a better place? I have tried. They're not run by the countries we're in. Their business models are not interested in that. So we just have focused on what we can achieve and supporting the people around us to be successful. There are people that Debbie will help in here quite a lot. We've helped numerous other researchers, projects such as the lovely Joe Hill, who's doing the conservancy work north of Murchison. And they're all successful because we've given them that cover. We've given them the support. We've come together, and the Uganda Wildlife Authority has understood that model. They get it because we're all working together. There is no politics. So I'll finish there, but I think Debbie's probably going to add here importantly as well.
Well, I was going to say that right now there's no answer to that question, and you explained it perfectly well. But I want to go on another little tangent that kind of goes along with that, and that is education. It is education of the Western world. It is amazing to me how naive we in America are about the situation in Asia and Africa as far as wildlife, but also as far as communities and what they, how they live and what they do without that. Their accommodations are in so many places in Africa. Accommodations are, or homes are, wood sticks with thatched roofs and dirt floors, and these are the happiest and nicest people, and they just live so very differently from how we live in the Western world. And we have so much, and I just think there's such a disparity that we need to really get people more aware of what's going on in Africa and what their needs are. And again, if you fix communities, if you provide a better standard of living for the people that live in these communities around parks, that deal with wildlife every day, you're going to protect the wildlife. You know, that's really the key. If you provide these communities resources to have a better life, a better standard of living, so that when an elephant comes in and raids their crops in one night, which destroys their livelihood for the year, we'll see a change. We'll see a change in how people who live with these wild animals look at the wild animals. That they're no longer pests, but they are something that can be treasured and protected. And I'm on a soapbox now, so I'm going to get off. But that's something that I would really like to see, is more education, a better awareness of people in the Western world to what the actual circumstances are and the actual needs are.
Absolutely, and I think that dovetails with a few of the different questions that we've had already. So we have about 6 minutes left in our hour. Does anyone have any additional questions or ideas? Want to know more from Mike?
I have a question for Mike I'm just curious to know, since I'm just starting this journey, started doing grad school in May, with the idea that I want to kind of be on the ground working directly with the animals at conservation, hopefully someday in Africa, what that's like, and what type of people are drawn to that, what kind of backgrounds they come from. I'd imagine you've got people of all sorts, both local and from elsewhere. So I was just wondering if you could expand a little bit on that lifestyle and how who's there with you and who's drawn to it generally?
Yeah, I mean, there's a very wide group of people. There's the research community that are interested in furthering science and knowledge. You have the protected area management professionals, which could, for instance, be accountants, lawyers, all sorts of different skills are required. And the rangers are professional in their own right, and they may be tour guides, they may be law enforcement people, they could also be community conservation trained, social development trained, they could be medics, they could be drivers. The plethora of skills that are entertained around any sort of park is no different to what you have anywhere in the world. You have wonderful people, interesting people, boring people, charismatic people, annoying people, you've got everything, and it's no different. But the lovely thing about my work in Uganda with the guys and girls that I've worked with is I've known them for 20 plus years. I'm beginning to show my age here, but they are my friends, genuine friends. If there's trouble, I will be there for them. And going on a patrol with them or working in a workshop with them is not only hard work, but it's an absolute pleasure. And I can't wait to go on the next patrol and sit around a campfire eating rubbish food, talking nonsense with them, because they're just gems. And it's why we do it. The extraordinary experiences that everyone who's worked in this sort of field have, people can't really comprehend. And I can tell you, when I used to go back to the UK to see my great university and school friends, I used to have to stop saying stories because they just didn't really understand them. You know, the usual thing of waking up when there's a lion at the end of your bed, and you know, they go, well, that's kind of normal. There's so many odd things that happen. It is one heck of an exhilarating career. But I would strongly suggest you come with it with skills, a profession. You move from architecture to conservation. And conservation requires professionalism, requires people coming with, you know, it might be marketing skills and branding skills, it might be accountancy, it might be legal, or whatever skill you can provide. You know, everyone brings something to the table. Saying you care is a great help. Saying you care, and I can help with this, this, and this, is even better. And when it comes to employment and saying I want to be an intern or whatever else, if you're good at data analytics or you're good at website design or whatever, you've got something to offer. And often the biggest challenge we have is lots of people who have so much passion, but then we're sort of going, well, actually, what can you do? And then we stall. And being an academic doesn't mean you're a manager. It means you understand the discipline of data and analytics, of focus, of publishing, of all sorts of different wonderful things with each and every sector. So we require skills and personalities all over the place. There's a place for everybody. My biggest recommendation is come with an armory of skills, and especially a profession, because we need that help. And as Sana said, she's willing to help with the PR stuff. Never forget what you're able to contribute, because it will always come down to someone like Debbie or Bruce or Sarah or whoever, Julie, to say where can we put this person? What can they do? Because there's 1,001 things that we need done. It's just who is available and has the skills to help us.
Very true.
Thank you. Very helpful.
So Sylvia, you had a question, didn't you?
I'm sorry?
Did you have a question too?
No.
Okay.
Debbie, I was just going to follow up on what Michael just said, and I agree with all he said, but one of the things that came out to me when I listened to what he said was to come with a skill. And I think historically, a lot of Westerners went into places like Asia and Africa, as Debbie talked about before, almost as the great white hope, if you will, but as an adventure for them, right? And so part they want to learn skills, but part they want this adventure. And I think in today's day and age, it would behoove younger people to get the skill sets and then have the adventure, like rather than make the adventure the way they get the skill sets. There are places like the place behind me in the United States where you can have a pretty extreme wildlife experience all within this country without spending lots of money on things just to survive. And get that skill set and then take it in a defined way to fill a need that people like the people in Uganda have. Because I think we are trying, Michael, you can certainly speak to this, we're trying more and more to get the local people in these countries trained to deal with their own problems, not only through the conservancies, but through the science, through the conservation, through the politics, through the law. We want them to be trained. And if you can come with that type of thing and help train them, you're really valuable.
That's very, very true.
Sorry, Debbie, I was just going to mention that I know we don't have an intern program, but I do think that what Bruce has said, what you've said and I've said before is making the link easier for people to get involved is something that we should ourselves live up to and possibly start to open up opportunities so we can get people out here, broaden our networks, get people on the front line, give them interesting projects, and maybe that's something that IEF, UCF, and others can start to act on. Not just talk it, but actually do it ourselves as well. So I think between Elizabeth and others, they just kicked us in the right direction.
And I just want to say one other thing, and that is I've been doing this for, we'll just say 20 years, okay? We don't have to be any more specific or longer than that, but and I've been doing this in countries throughout Asia and Africa and Europe too. And I love people in conservation. I mean, there's every once in a while a bad apple, but overall, I love, they're just the nicest people in the world. They're passionate. They love what they're doing, and they're just the nicest people in the world, and they'll give their shirts off their backs to you and always make you feel welcome. And so it's a great profession to get into. But yes, I can't underscore what Mike and Bruce said enough. We get so many people who want to help projects. They want to go to Africa and work in our projects, but they don't have any skills. They just want that experience. And really the way to go is to get some background, get a skill or two that is very valuable, and then you'll be very useful in the conservation world. And again, go for it. If you have the passion, go for it. It's the best.
Well,
I just endorse that. To go for it bit. Sorry, Sarah, I cut you off.
oh no, I was.
It's the only reason that I've managed to achieve things is that I haven't given up. And we have gone through rebel activity. We've gone through everything you can imagine that could possibly be impossible. To the point that right at the beginning of when we started all this, we couldn't raise $50 for Uganda. No one cared about Uganda. It wasn't popular. Everyone went to the same old Kenya, South Africa, whatever, which takes 90% of conservation money. You really have to be active and dogmatic about it. You've just got to follow your passion and your dreams. Make it your own. Create it. Bug people, say, I need to do this. I want.
Oh, Mike, I think you just muted yourself.
So do we have any other questions?
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for taking part in our very first Conservation Roundtable and for your very thoughtful questions. We really enjoyed it. I hope you all enjoyed meeting Mike and getting a little glimpse into the life of what Uganda conservation is about. Thank you so much. And Julie will definitely be emailing you with follow-up information and future conservation roundtables with other project investigators that I think you'll really enjoy. So thank you very much. We really appreciate all of your support.